The first time I saw my life's worth summed up in a viral video, my phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. In my own kitchen, on a screen watched by thousands, my daughter-in-law's saccharine voice narrated over a shot of me arranging flowers. "It's just so sad," Haley cooed, "when they get to that age. So frumpy, so aimless." My world didn't just crack, it atomized. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, if you've ever been made to feel like a burden, hit that like button and subscribe, because you need to hear how this ends. The buzzing wouldn't stop. It was a physical thing, a vibration that started in my palm and snaked up my arm, settling like a hornet's nest in my chest. I was standing at the kitchen sink, the scent of lemon dish soap and damp earth from the gardenias I'd just cut filling the air. It was a Tuesday, a perfectly ordinary, forgettable Tuesday, the kind that had become the wallpaper of my life since my husband, Mark, passed away 3 years ago. The phone buzzed again. A text from Carol, my friend from my old nursing book club. "Linda, have you seen this? Call me." Then another from my sister. "Honey, what is going on?" My thumb trembled as I tapped on the link Carol had sent. The screen resolved into a familiar, sickeningly bright filter. It was Haley's Instagram page. And there it was. My kitchen. My kitchen. The one Mark and I had designed, with the amber-colored tiles we'd picked out on a trip to Santa Fe. And there I was, back to the camera, wearing Mark's old flannel shirt because it still smelled faintly of him, of sawdust and old spice. I was humming, arranging the flowers in the vase my son, Ethan, had made for me in a pottery class when he was 10. Haley's voice, a syrupy, affected drawl she used for her followers, washed over the video. "Hey guys, so a lot of you have been asking what it's like having my mother-in-law live with us." A dramatic put-upon sigh. I mean, it's a journey. The camera zoomed in on the back of my head, my graying hair tied up in a messy bun. We try to be supportive, you know? After my father-in-law passed, she just had nowhere to go. A lie. A bald-faced, venomous lie. I hadn't been homeless. I had been lonely. Ethan had begged me to sell my house and move in, saying he didn't want me rattling around in that big place all by myself. He'd framed it as a kindness. "It's just so hard to watch them lose their purpose," Haley continued, her voice dripping with counterfeit pity. The camera panned over my comfortable, worn-in slippers. "So frumpy? It's like they just give up. We're trying to, gently encourage her to find a hobby. But, you know." She let the sentence hang, letting her million followers fill in the blanks. "She's a burden. She's pathetic. She's a charity case." The video ended with a shot of Haley, her face a perfect mask of compassion, whispering, "Send prayers and positive vibes. Y'all." The comments were a cascade of digital sympathy for her. "You're a saint. Haley. So brave of you to take that on. My grandma is the same way. It's so draining." I felt the blood drain from my face. The vase slipped from my fingers, shattering against the tile floor. Water, glass, and white gardenia petals exploded across the floor I had mopped just that morning. I didn't flinch. All I could hear was that word, frumpy. That, and draining. The public humiliation was a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. These weren't strangers, my friends, my sister. Mark's family, they were all seeing this. They were all seeing Haley's carefully crafted fiction of me as a pitiable old woman she had magnanimously rescued. The woman in that video was a stranger, a caricature painted with cruelty and condescension. But the kitchen was mine. The pain was mine. And as I stared at the wreckage of the flowers on the floor, a cold, hard clarity began to settle in the pit of my stomach. The life I had known was over. It had been murdered on a Tuesday for likes. The house felt different that night. The silence, which had once been a comforting echo of a life well lived with Mark, was now accusatory. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a whisper of Haley's insults. I walked through the downstairs rooms, my hand trailing along the walls, a ghost in my own home, or rather, in their home, which had been built with the proceeds from selling my home. I saw the ghost of Mark everywhere, in the worn spot on the leather armchair where he'd read the paper, in the faint scuff marks by the back door where he'd always kicked off his work boots. I remembered the promise I'd made to him in the sterile, beeping quiet of the hospital room. "I'll look after Ethan," I'd whispered, my hand clutching his. "I promise." And I had. Oh, how I had. I'd poured every ounce of myself into that promise. I had used the nest egg Mark and I had so carefully built to fund Ethan's master's degree. I'd paid for their lavish wedding, biting my tongue when Haley insisted on a designer dress that cost more than my first car. When Ethan's tech startup failed, I drained my savings to keep them from foreclosure, telling them it was just a loan we all knew would never be repaid. I did it because he was my son, Mark's son. I did it because I thought that's what a mother does. You sacrifice. You give. You build a foundation so your children can reach higher. But as I stood there, in the dark, the memory of Haley's video played on a loop in my mind. The foundation I'd built wasn't for them to stand on. It was for them to bury me under. I saw my sacrifices not as acts of love, but as transactions in which I had been fleeced. My generosity had been reframed as desperation. My presence, which Ethan had claimed to desire, was now my defining pathetic trait. I remembered a conversation from a few weeks ago. Haley had been complaining about their finances, about how her brand wasn't growing fast enough. "We just need a better story," she'd said, scrolling through her phone. "Something authentic, something people can connect with." I realized with a sickening jolt that I had become her story. My grief was her content. My life was her brand. I went into the garage, the one place that was still truly mine, filled with Mark's old tools and half-finished woodworking projects. I ran my hand over the dusty surface of his workbench, my fingers tracing the deep gouges and coffee cup rings. He had spent hours out here, creating, building, fixing. He could take a piece of raw timber and turn it into something beautiful and strong. He'd always said, "Linda, you can't build a sturdy house on a rotten foundation." And for the first time, I understood. The foundation of this life, this arrangement, was rotten to the core. It was built on my self-deception and their entitlement. The promise I made to Mark wasn't to be a doormat for his son. It was to look after him. And maybe looking after him meant teaching him a lesson that I, in my blind love, had let him skip. The lesson of consequences. The breaking point didn't come with a shout or a slammed door. It arrived quietly, the next morning, over coffee. I was rinsing out my favorite mug, a heavy ceramic one with a chipped rim that Mark had bought for me at a roadside stand in Arizona on our 20th anniversary trip. It was ugly, but it was ours. Haley breezed into the kitchen, already dressed in skin-tight athletic wear, her phone in her hand as she framed a shot of her detox smoothie. "Ugh, are you still using that thing?" she said, not even looking at me, her eyes on her own reflection on the phone's screen. "It's so cluttered. I'm doing a whole minimalist kitchen refresh for the blog. We need clean lines, white, sterile." Duh, before I could even process her words, she plucked the mug from my hand, walked over to the trash can, and tossed it in. It landed with a dull, final thud on a bed of coffee grounds and eggshells. Something inside me, something that had been dormant for 3 long years, snapped. It wasn't just a mug. It was the sunrise we'd watched over the Grand Canyon, the feel of Mark's hand in mine, the memory of him laughing as I tried to haggle with the vendor. It was the last tangible piece of a life she was trying to systematically erase. She wasn't just decluttering the kitchen, she was decluttering me. She was throwing away my history, my memories, my husband. I said nothing. I didn't fish the mug out of the trash. I didn't cry. I simply turned, looked at her, really looked at her, and saw her for the empty, polished vessel she was. And in that moment, the grief that had been my constant companion for 3 years finally burned away, leaving behind something clean and hard and cold. It was rage, a silent, simmering rage that felt less like an emotion and more like a purpose. I had been playing a game with no rules, a game of love and duty. Haley was playing a different game, a game of aesthetics and optics, and she had just taught me how to win. That afternoon, while she was at a yoga class and Ethan was at work, I didn't clean the kitchen. I didn't do their laundry. I sat at the dining room table, the one they'd let me keep, and opened my laptop. The search bar blinked at me, waiting. My fingers, steady now, typed in the words I hadn't dared to even think before. Used Class C RVs for sale near Austin. The screen filled with images of freedom, of open roads and endless horizons, of small, self-contained worlds on wheels. I thought of the map of the United States that hung in Mark's old office, riddled with pins from all the places we had dreamed of going when we retired. A plan began to form, not a vague wish, but a detailed, step-by-step blueprint. My grief had made me a ghost in their house, but my anger was about to give me a new life. They wanted minimalist? I would give them minimalist. I would strip their lives down to the studs, and I would do it without saying a single word. The next few weeks were a masterclass in duplicity. On the surface, I was the woman from Haley's video. I was quiet, accommodating, and invisible. I made their beds, cooked their meals, and nodded meekly when Haley talked about her grand plans for redecorating my sunroom into her new content studio. I was playing the part of the frumpy, pathetic widow so perfectly that they never once looked up from their phones long enough to see the glint in my eyes. They saw what they wanted to see, a fixture, a convenience, a live-in housekeeper they didn't have to pay. But when they were gone, the house transformed into my secret command center. The rustling of legal documents became the soundtrack to my rebellion. I had my first meeting with a financial advisor in a coffee shop halfway across town. He was a kind man with gentle eyes who looked at my portfolio, which was far more substantial than Ethan and Haley knew, and told me I had options. More than options, I had power. He helped me discreetly liquidate a set of stocks Mark had invested in years ago, transferring the money into a new bank account under my name only, with paperless statements sent to a new email address. My second meeting was with a sharp, no-nonsense realtor named Maria. We met at the public library. I explained the situation. The house was in my name. A holdover from when I'd sold my previous property to finance this one. Ethan was on the title, but I was the primary owner. "We can do a quiet sale," she'd said, a small, conspiratorial smile on her face. "No sign in the yard. Private showings only. It'll be gone before they know what hit them." The thought sent a thrill of pure, unadulterated adrenaline through me. While Haley was busy taking selfies and complaining about the algorithm, I was signing papers, arranging inspections, and reviewing offers. I spent my afternoons at RV dealerships, learning the difference between a gray tank and a black tank, testing mattresses, and imagining myself behind the wheel. I found her, a 25-foot, slightly used Winnebago with surprisingly low mileage. She wasn't flashy, but she was sturdy, solid. I named her Old Glory, not for the flag, but for the glory of growing old on my own terms. I paid in cash. The whole time, I moved through their house like a phantom, packing my real life into a few small, essential boxes I stored in a rented unit a few towns over. I packed Mark's photos, his woodworking tools, my nursing degree, and the few pieces of jewelry that mattered. I left behind the furniture, the dishes, the life they thought I was clinging to. I was shedding a skin, and it felt incredible. They thought I was fading away, but I was crystallizing. The closing was scheduled for a Friday morning at 10 That morning, I woke up at my usual time of 5:30. I made coffee. The good stuff I kept hidden in the back of the pantry. I walked through the house one last time, not with sadness, but with the detached curiosity of a visitor in a museum of a life that was no longer mine. The air was still and quiet. Ethan and Haley were still asleep upstairs, cocooned in their world of thread counts and self-importance. I didn't pack a suitcase. My things were already gone. I simply took my purse, the keys to Old Glory, and a single white envelope. I walked into the kitchen, the scene of my original humiliation, and placed the envelope squarely in the middle of the cold Granite Island Haley loved so much. Inside wasn't a long, tearful letter. It was 2 documents. The first was a copy of the final sale agreement for the house. The second was a simple, typed note. It read, "You wanted a minimalist aesthetic. I hope this is a good start. The new owners take possession in 48 hours. I suggest you start packing. You wanted a story for your blog. Now you have one. Don't try to find me. Linda." I didn't slam the door on my way out. I closed it softly, the click of the latch a final, satisfying punctuation mark. Old Glory was parked a few blocks away, packed and ready. As I turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbled to life with a low, throaty growl that sounded like the sweetest symphony I had ever heard. I pulled out onto the street and didn't look back. I didn't need to. There was nothing for me in the rearview mirror. As I merged onto I-35, heading north with the rising sun at my back, I felt a sense of peace settle over me for the first time in years. I wasn't running away from something. I was driving toward everything. The house was sold. The accounts were empty. The woman they thought they knew was gone. It was just me, Old Glory, and 1,000 miles of open road. The first few weeks were a blur of cheap diner coffee, stunning sunsets over landscapes I'd only ever seen in magazines, and a profound, terrifying silence. The silence was the hardest part. Without the constant hum of Haley's grievances or the background noise of their lives, I was left with only myself. There were moments of panic, usually in the dead of night at some lonely RV park in the middle of nowhere, where I'd wake up convinced I'd made a terrible mistake, but then the sun would rise. I'd make coffee in Mark's old chipped mug, which I had, of course, rescued from the trash that fateful day, and the feeling would pass. I hadn't intended to become a creator, as Haley would call it. The idea was laughable, but I was lonely, and I needed to talk. So, one afternoon at a campsite overlooking the Ozarks, I propped my phone up on the dashboard of the RV, hit record, and just started talking. I didn't use a filter. I didn't have a script. I just talked about my day, about learning how to empty the septic tank, about the kindness of a stranger who helped me fix a leaky hose. I titled the video, "Retired and Reborn, Day 22, and uploaded it to YouTube, thinking maybe my sister would watch it. I didn't check it for a week. When I finally logged on at a truck stop with decent Wi-Fi, I almost dropped my phone. The video had thousands of views and comments, hundreds of them. They were from women my age, from all over the country. "Linda, you are my hero. I'm a widow too, and I feel so stuck. You've given me hope. My daughter-in-law is a Haley. God bless you." It was a revelation. I wasn't alone. My story, the one Haley had tried to use to shame me, was resonating with people in a way her glossy, fake content never could. So I kept posting. I posted videos of me changing a flat tire in the rain in Missouri, of getting lost on a back road in Nebraska, of sitting by a campfire in Wyoming with the Tetons as my backdrop. It was raw, and it was real. I talked about Mark, about my grief, about the slow, painful process of rediscovering who I was without him. I never mentioned Ethan or Haley by name, but I talked about feeling invisible, about being taken for granted. And my audience grew. They called themselves Linda's Road Crew. They sent me tips on campsites, shared their own stories, and cheered me on. I had stumbled into a community, a family forged not by blood, but by shared experience. For the first time, I felt seen. Not as a mother, not as a widow, not as a frumpy burden, but as Linda, and it was more than enough. From a stunningly beautiful free campsite in the Montana wilderness, surrounded by whispering pines, I became a spectator to the slow, satisfying implosion of my son's life. It was a guilty pleasure, like eating ice cream for dinner. I'd check Haley's Instagram page every few days. At first, there was a frantic, desperate energy. A post of them surrounded by moving boxes, captioned with a fabricated story about starting a new, exciting chapter in a chic downtown apartment. The apartment, I quickly deduced from the window views, was a cramped, soulless rental in a less than desirable part of Austin. Then, the sponsored posts began to change. The high-end skincare and designer clothes were replaced by posts for meal delivery kits and obscure mobile games. The cracks in the facade were beginning to show. Her follower count stagnated, then started to dip. The comments section, once a haven of fawning praise, became more pointed. "Why did you move? Where's Ethan's mom? Your content feels different lately." She never answered. I knew their financial situation better than they did. The house had been their biggest asset, the anchor that allowed them to live a life far beyond their means. Without my Social Security and pension income subsidizing their groceries, their utilities, their life, reality began to bite. I pictured them in that tiny apartment, the walls closing in, their carefully curated world crumbling. I imagined Haley trying to find the perfect lighting for a selfie, while a mountain of unpaid bills sat just out of frame. The ultimate satisfaction came about 6 months after my departure. Haley posted a tearful story to her Instagram. Her face was puffy, her makeup smeared. She talked vaguely about authenticity and facing challenges. She announced she was taking a break from social media to focus on what's real. It was code, and I knew exactly what it meant. The brands had dropped her. The money had run out. Her career as an influencer, which had been bankrolled by my life savings and propped up by the sale of my home, was over. I took a sip of my coffee, the same chipped mug warm in my hands, and watched a bald eagle soar over the valley below. I felt no pity. I felt no anger. I just felt the quiet, simple justice of gravity. They had built their house of cards on my back, and now that I was gone, it had all come tumbling down. The call came on a Tuesday, almost a year to the day after Haley's infamous video. I was in Colorado, parked near a rushing river, watching a family of deer graze in a meadow. The caller ID flashed Ethan. My heart gave a single hard thump against my ribs, an old instinctual maternal reaction, before settling into a calm, steady rhythm. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. "Hello, Ethan." My voice was even calm. The voice of a woman who had just spent an hour successfully backing a 25-foot vehicle into a tricky spot. Mom, is that you?" He sounded frantic. his voice thin and reedy. "My God, Mom, where are you? We've been so worried." Worried. The word was so absurd I almost laughed. "I'm fine, Ethan. I've been fine." "Fine? Mom, you just disappeared. You sold the house out from under us. We had to move into this shoebox. Haley lost all her contracts. It's been a nightmare." There it was. The litany of grievances. The complete absence of self-awareness. It wasn't an apology. It was an accusation. I listened patiently, the sound of the river a soothing counterpoint to his panicked whining. In the background, I could hear Haley's muffled voice. "Tell her about the car. Tell her about the rent." "Mom, listen," he said, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper I knew all too well. It was the voice he used when he needed money. "We're in a real bind. The landlord is threatening to evict us. My car got repossessed last week. We just need a little help, just a loan, to get back on our feet. You must have, from the house." I looked out at the mountains, their peaks dusted with snow against a piercing blue sky. I thought of the past year, of the fear and the loneliness, but also the joy, the strength I'd found, the kindness of strangers. I thought of the thousands of people in my road crew who had become more of a family to me than he had been. "No," I said. It was a simple word, but it felt like the heaviest, most powerful thing I had ever uttered. "What? What do you mean?" "No?" he stammered, caught completely off guard. "I mean, no, Ethan. The bank of Mom is permanently closed. I worked for 40 years as a nurse. Mark worked his fingers to the bone. That money was our future. You and Haley built a life on it, and you treated me like dirt. Now, the money is mine. The future is mine." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear his brain trying to compute this new reality. The meek and compliant woman he had taken for granted was gone. "But you're my mother," he finally sputtered, as if that was a trump card. "I am," I said softly. "And because I am your mother, I'm giving you the greatest gift I have left to give you, the opportunity to stand on your own 2 feet. Goodbye, Ethan." I ended the call before he could respond. I blocked his number, then Haley's. I took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air, and for the first time, I felt truly, completely free. The last chain had been broken. I should have known they wouldn't give up that easily. Entitlement is a hard habit to break. 2 months later, I was parked in Zion National Park in Utah. I had just returned from a long, glorious hike through the Narrows, my legs tired but my spirit soaring. As I approached my campsite, I saw them. They were standing by Old Glory, looking lost and out of place, like a pair of exotic, wilting birds. Haley was wearing white designer sneakers, now caked in red dust. Ethan's face was pale and unshaven. They looked thin, frayed at the edges. They looked defeated. They saw me, and a flicker of something, relief, desperation, crossed Ethan's face. "Mom," he said, taking a step toward me. I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt a strange, clinical detachment. I was a nurse looking at a patient, assessing the damage, and the damage was extensive. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice calm. "Your YouTube channel," Haley said, her voice raspy. She gestured vaguely at the RV. "People post their locations. They say where Linda is." The way she said my name was laced with a bitterness that was almost impressive. "So you drove all the way to Utah," I stated. It wasn't a question. "We had to," Ethan pleaded. "Mom, we have nowhere else to go. We were evicted. We've been sleeping in the car." He gestured to a beat-up old sedan parked nearby, a car I didn't recognize. "Please, just help us." I looked from my son's desperate face to my daughter-in-law's sullen one. I remembered the woman who stood in this very spot an hour ago, a woman who had just hiked for miles through a river, whose body was strong, whose mind was clear. Then I looked at them. They had come expecting to find the broken, lonely widow from their video, the woman who would fold at the first sign of their distress. But that woman was a ghost. They didn't know the person standing in front of them. She was a stranger, and she was not their savior. "You came all this way," I said slowly, "expecting me to fix this for you." "You're our mother," Ethan repeated, the words sounding hollow now, a broken mantra. "Yes," I said, "I am, and I am done fixing things for you that you broke yourselves." I unlocked the door to the RV, my home, and stepped inside, closing it firmly behind me, leaving them standing alone in the Utah dust. They were still there when the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon. They hadn't moved. 2 statues of desperation camped outside my door. I knew this had to end. I couldn't just drive away, and I couldn't let them stay. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped back outside. I was holding something in my hand. Ethan looked up, a pathetic flicker of hope in his eyes, as if he thought I was holding a checkbook. Haley just glared. I walked over to the picnic table and laid the object down. It was a map, a simple folded paper road atlas of the United States, its cover worn and its creases soft from use. "A year ago," I began, my voice quiet but carrying in the still desert air, "my life was a small, gray box. You helped me see that. You thought you were burying me, but you had no idea you were planting a seed." I looked at them, not with hate, but with a final weary clarity. "You took my money, you took my home, you took my dignity, but you gave me a gift in return. You gave me nothing left to lose. And that's where freedom starts." I unfolded the map. With a pen, I drew a circle around Austin, Texas. Then I drew a line, tracing the route I had taken through Arkansas, Missouri, Wyoming, Montana, and now here, to Utah. "This was the start of my journey," I said, my voice steady. "This was me learning to read a map again, learning to trust myself, learning to be alone, learning to build a life from scratch with nothing but a tank of gas and a flicker of hope." I folded the map back up and pushed it across the table toward them. Ethan stared at it as if it were a snake. Haley looked at it with pure contempt. "I have no more money to give you," I said, my voice gentle but absolute. "I have no home to offer you. All I have left to give you is this, an inheritance of a different kind." I tapped the map. "This is your starting point. You have a car. You have each other. The rest of the country is out there. Find a job. Find a purpose. Find your own way. Stop looking for someone else to draw the map for you." I turned and walked back to Old Glory without another word. I got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the campsite. In my rearview mirror, I saw them one last time, standing there in the twilight, 2 lost children in the vastness of the American wilderness, with nothing but a map between them. I didn't know where they would go. I didn't know what they would do. And for the first time, I realized I didn't care. My journey was forward, toward a horizon that was finally, completely my own. The fire crackles, a lonely, lovely sound under a canopy of 1 billion stars. Out here, the silence doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels full of possibility. It's funny. I spent so much of my life building a home for other people. I forgot to build one for myself. It turns out my home isn't made of wood and nails. It's made of wheels and a strong heart. It's the kindness of a stranger in a diner, the majesty of a mountain range at dawn, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I am enough, just as I am. The path I took was born from pain and betrayal, but it led me here to a peace I never thought possible. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet rumble of an engine driving off into the sunset, leaving the past behind in a cloud of dust. It's not about revenge, it's about reclaiming the story and writing your own ending. I share my story not for pity, but to be a small light for anyone else sitting in the dark, feeling invisible. What was the moment you knew you had to make a change in your life? Have you ever had to start completely over? And what did it teach you? Let me know in the comments below. Your stories give me strength on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It means the world to know I'm not driving this road alone.